My pregnant sister mocked my son, saying he was fatherless. Then my son revealed her husband's secret. My name is Grace. And this is the story I never thought I'd tell. A story about family, betrayal, and a secret that nearly tore us apart. They say family is everything, but they never tell you how quickly it can turn into a battlefield. But sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come from enemies, they come from the people who share your blood. I'm the oldest of 3 sisters, the one who was born tired, responsible, and always fixing what others broke. If something went wrong in our family, my name was the one whispered in panic, "Call Grace, she'll handle it." After my husband, David, died in that car accident 6 years ago, I learned that silence has a sound. It hums in the walls after everyone leaves your house. It sits at your dining table in the chair no one touches. It follows you into bed when the lights go off, whispering every "what if" you try it to bury. My son, Ethan, was just 6 then. He had his father's eyes, kind, soft, curious, but the way he looked at me made me feel like I couldn't fall apart. So I didn't. I ran a small bakery out of our kitchen, cakes, pastries, and sweet bread for birthdays I was rarely invited to. Ethan became my shadow, my little helper. He'd wear this oversized apron that almost touched the floor and proudly announce himself as assistant manager. He'd count money with the seriousness of a banker and taste test frosting like a food critic. When he smiled, I forgot how lonely the world could be. For years, it was just us, our quiet routines, our morning laughter, and the sound of rain tapping the roof while we baked. Then one morning, my younger sister, Clara, called. Her voice was sugar-coated as always. "Grace? I'm coming home for a few weeks before the baby comes. You'll love Victor, he insists I shouldn't be alone until delivery." And just like that, the fragile calm I had built began to tremble. Clara arrived 2 days later, glowing, radiant, and full of life. She didn't walk into rooms, she owned them. She had this perfume that made the whole house smell expensive, and when she laughed, it filled every space like a performance. Her husband, Victor, followed quietly behind her. Tall, well-dressed, polite, the kind of man who smiled without showing too much emotion. When he shook my hand, I noticed his wedding ring gleamed brighter than his eyes. They were the picture of success. And me? I was still the widow running a bakery out of grief and determination. For the first few days, everything was warm, dinners filled with laughter, baby clothes spread across my couch, Ethan trailing behind Clara, as if he'd finally found a new playmate. But peace, I've learned, doesn't always explode. Sometimes it leaks slowly, silently, through the cracks of what looks like love. Clara had always been that sister. The golden one. The one who married a man with money and called it destiny. The one who made every conversation about her pregnancy, her life, her glow. I tried not to mind. Family, after all, was family. But this time, she was different. There was something behind her smile, something sharper. She would laugh too loudly at her own jokes and then scan the room to see if anyone else dared not to. And she started making comments. Little ones at first. About my house, about my clothes, about the way Ethan preferred books over football. One evening, while Victor and I were setting the table, Clara looked at Ethan and said, "Grace, maybe you should let him play outside more. He's always reading, no wonder he's so quiet. Kids need a father's voice to roughen them up." She laughed, that light, dismissive kind of laugh that sounds harmless to everyone except the person bleeding from it. Ethan froze. His fork clattered against the plate. I wanted to say something, but my throat betrayed me. So I smiled, pretending it was nothing. But later that night, I found him sitting by the window, holding a framed photo of David. "Mom," he said softly, "is it bad not to have a dad?" His voice cracked on the word dad. And that sound broke something deep inside me. I pulled him close, kissed his hair, and whispered, "No, baby. You have love, and that's enough." He nodded. But I could tell he didn't believe me. The next morning, Clara made pancakes for breakfast, acting like nothing had happened. She joked, she smiled, and when Victor kissed her forehead, she shot me this smug little look that said I win. But I wasn't playing any game. Except, maybe she was. Because each passing day, her comments grew sharper, cutting Ethan in ways I couldn't always shield him from. "Grace, he's too soft. Don't baby him so much. Or, you should find someone new. Ethan needs a man's hand around." I started noticing Victor's silence whenever she said those things. The way his jaw tightened. The way his eyes avoided mine. It was almost as if he knew something I didn't. And I was right. Because behind Clara's perfect smile and Victor's quiet politeness, something was rotting. And it wouldn't stay buried for long. Weeks went by. The air in the house began to feel different, heavier, as if silence itself had weight. Clara had turned my home into a stage, and we were all just background actors in her drama. She'd bark orders at everyone. "Grace, move this table here. Ethan, stop staring and bring me water. Victor, don't you think this couch looks old?" And every time she spoke, her words carried a strange authority, like she'd forgotten she was a guest. Mom tried to calm things. "She's pregnant, Grace. The mood swings will pass. Just be patient." Patience, that word again. It had become my curse. But patience is a fragile thread, and one evening, it snapped. We were all at the dinner table. The smell of stew filled the room, the kind David used to love. For a moment, I almost felt normal again. Ethan sat next to me, careful and quiet, spooning soup like it was a sacred ritual. Clara sat across from us, glowing in her silk dress, one manicured hand resting on her belly. Victor looked distracted, staring into his plate more than her face. Then it happened, a small, innocent mistake that would change everything. Ethan reached for the salt, and his sleeve brushed against Clara's bowl. A splash of soup stained her expensive dress. There was silence, sharp and complete. Then Clara exploded. "Oh, for God's sake," she snapped, slamming her napkin down. "This is why kids need fathers around, to teach them discipline." Her words cut through the room like lightning. Even the ticking clock seemed to stop. Ethan froze mid-motion, his hand trembling above the table. His eyes widened, those soft brown eyes suddenly filled with tears. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Aunt Clara," and ran out of the room. I sat there, stunned, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the hallway. "Clara," I said finally, voice shaking. "That was cruel." She didn't even flinch. "I'm just saying the truth." "But truth isn't supposed to bleed you." Victor looked up then, as if waking from a dream. "Clara, that was uncalled for," he murmured. She shot him a look that could freeze fire. "Oh please, Victor, don't start acting holy now." The table went quiet again. Even Mom didn't move. That night, I found Ethan sitting by the window again, just like the night Clara first mocked him. He was clutching the same picture of his father, the one in uniform, smiling. When he saw me, his voice was small. "I'm not bad, right, Mom? I'm not bad because Dad's gone." Something inside me broke cleanly, like glass underfoot. I held him tight, pressing my face into his hair. "No, baby. You're the best thing your father ever left me." But as he fell asleep in my arms, I realized something had changed in him, and maybe in me too. He was quieter now. Distant. And there was a look in his eyes that I couldn't name, something too old for his age. Days passed. The tension between Clara and Victor became unbearable. Sometimes, I'd hear them arguing behind closed doors. Her voice was sharp, his was calm but tired, the kind of tone that comes from carrying secrets. At night, I'd hear the floorboards creak as Victor wandered into the living room, pacing. Once, I saw him sitting on the couch, head in hands, staring at the dark like it was staring back. And even though I tried to convince myself that it wasn't my concern, I knew something was building, something ugly. A storm doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it begins with whispers. It was a Sunday morning when I first noticed Ethan acting off. He was sitting outside under the mango tree, sketching, his favorite hobby. He drew everything he saw, from the neighbor's cat to the pattern of rain on the window. But that morning, he was unusually quiet. I walked up behind him, smiling softly. "What are you drawing this time, champ?" He turned the notebook toward me. It was a picture of Victor. Only, he wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman, tall, graceful, with long hair and earrings that sparkled on paper. They were standing close, their hands almost touching. I frowned. "Sweetheart, who's that woman?" Ethan looked up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "She comes at night." My heart skipped. "What do you mean, she comes?" "I saw Uncle Victor in the living room last night," he said simply, flipping his pencil between his fingers. He was hugging her. They were whispering. She had red shoes. I laughed softly, nervous. "Honey, maybe you dreamed that. You were half asleep, right?" He shook his head, calm and sure. "No, Mom. I couldn't sleep. I went to get water. I saw them through the hallway." He told her, "No one can ever know." I froze. The way he said it, so casual, so precise, it didn't sound like a child's imagination. It sounded like truth. That night, I couldn't shake his words. I told myself he'd misunderstood. That maybe Victor had met a relative or a friend. But then, why would he say, "No one can ever know"? The next morning, Clara was all smiles again, glowing, radiant, showing off the baby clothes she'd ordered online. Victor barely said a word during breakfast. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. And when Clara mentioned she wanted a baby shower, his fork slipped from his hand. Something was unraveling. And somehow, I knew Ethan had seen the first thread. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I walked to the living room quietly. The air felt cold. I looked around, everything was still. But then, I saw movement. A reflection. Through the faint glow of the window, I saw Victor's silhouette. He was standing by the door, phone in hand, whispering. And then I heard it. The same phrase my son had repeated. "No one can ever know." It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that smells like soap and sunlight. I was cleaning the guest room. Clara had gone shopping with Mom, and Victor had left early for a meeting. The house was finally still. Ethan was outside feeding the birds, humming softly. That sound, his soft voice, always centered me. But that day, even peace had a pulse. I dusted Clara's dresser, humming along, until something caught my eye, a faint glint inside the drawer. At first, I thought it was her compact mirror. But when I pulled it open, it wasn't that. It was a phone. A small, older model. Cracked screen. No case. No SIM sticker. It didn't look like her usual phone, the sleek one she always carried around like a trophy. For a long minute, I just stared at it. Then curiosity, or maybe instinct, got the better of me. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. No password. That alone felt strange. Clara guarded her privacy like treasure. My pulse quickened. And then I saw it. A string of messages from a contact saved simply as V heavy blackheart hash. At first, I thought it was Victor. Maybe just the affectionate nickname she gave her husband. But then I started to read. When I look at you, I forget she even exists. You're the only thing keeping me sane. We just need to be careful until after the baby's born. Don't worry, my wife doesn't suspect a thing. I froze. My throat went dry. Wife? The word jumped out like a slap. I scrolled faster, messages dating back months. Photos, blurry, hidden, but intimate. Hotel rooms. Candlelit dinners. Hands entwined under tables. And then one image that made my knees buckle. Victor kissing Clara's pregnant stomach. My breath caught. My body trembled. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone like it might explode. Her sister's husband. My brother-in-law. The man sitting at my dinner table. The man telling Ethan to be careful with his manners. The man who kissed my mother's cheek every Sunday morning and called her Mom. The father of her unborn child. Or was he? 1,000 moments flashed before me. Clara's smug smiles. Her jokes about Ethan being fatherless. Her sudden need to move in. The way Victor's eyes followed her, not with brotherly concern, but with guilt. It all clicked together like broken glass reforming its shape. She wasn't mocking me because I was weak. She was mocking me because she was drowning in her own sin. And the noise she made, the laughter, the cruelty, it was her way of drowning out the sound of her own conscience. I sat there for what felt like hours, phone still in my hand, tears drying on my cheeks. Ethan peeked in at one point. Mom? Are you okay? I turned the phone face down quickly. Forced a smile. Yes, sweetheart. Just a little tired. He nodded, trusting as always, and ran off. But inside, my world was tilting. That evening, Clara came home humming. Bags of baby clothes in one hand, a smug grin on her face. She looked radiant. Maybe guilt glowed too. Victor walked in behind her, the perfect husband mask still firmly in place. I watched them both through the dinner hour, barely tasting my food. Their hands brushed once, unintentionally, or maybe intentionally. Their eyes met, a flicker, quick but undeniable. My chest tightened. They thought no one knew. They thought their whispers were secrets. But secrets are like shadows, you can't hide them in daylight forever. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the living room, lights dim, house quiet. The clock ticked softly. My mind was a storm. I thought about calling Mom, but what would I say? Your pregnant daughter is sleeping with her sister's husband. No? Not yet. I needed proof. I needed clarity. And more than that, I needed calm. Because anger without direction destroys, but anger with patience, it becomes power. The next day, I woke up early. I packed Ethan's school lunch, walked him to the gate, kissed his forehead. Be good, okay? I whispered. He nodded, eyes searching mine. Are you still sad, Mom? I'm okay, baby. I wasn't. But I would be. Back home, Clara was still asleep, her phone glowing faintly on the nightstand, the same cracked one. I took a deep breath. Opened the door quietly. And took one more look at the messages. There were new ones. Fresh ones. The heavy black heart hash, I'll see you tonight. She's going out for groceries, right? Clara, yes? She never suspects. I almost feel bad, almost. Almost. I closed the phone gently, placed it back, and left the room. But my decision was already made. That evening, I didn't go for groceries. Instead, I stayed home, silent, hidden, waiting. The hours crawled by. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. And then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Low voices. Victor's whisper, unmistakable. And Clara's giggle, breathy, nervous. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stepped closer to the living room door and peered through the small gap. There they were. On the couch. Her head on his shoulder. His hand resting on her stomach. He whispered, "No one can ever know." And that was when Ethan's voice, small, sleepy, and pure, came from behind me. "But I already know." They froze. Clara's head snapped up. Victor turned white. And in that frozen moment, everything, every secret, every lie, every stolen glance, came crashing down. That night, I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. I just sat on the edge of my bed, the cracked phone glowing faintly on my lap, the truth humming like a silent bomb waiting to go off. My chest was tight, but my mind was calm, too calm. Sometimes silence is the loudest scream your heart can make. Ethan slept beside me, his small hand resting on my arm. He was breathing softly, unaware of the storm he'd walked into. Or maybe, he knew more than I thought. Morning came heavy. The air itself felt thick, like the house could sense what was about to happen. I made breakfast, quiet, automatic. Eggs. Toast. Tea. The kind of meal you make when your hands need something to do because your mind is burning. Clara came down late, wearing Victor's sweatshirt, the one she claimed was just comfy. Her eyes were red, but her voice was syrupy sweet. "Good morning, everyone," she said, forcing a smile. Ethan looked at her. Then at me. Then back at her again, as if he was trying to decide whether to speak or stay silent. I gave him a gentle smile, the kind that says not now. But sometimes, truth has its own timing. Dinner was quiet that night. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where even the clinking of cutlery sounds like thunder. Victor had arrived late, apologizing, blaming traffic. Clara avoided his eyes. Mom sat between them, trying to pretend nothing was wrong, humming softly as if to fill the silence. And then, halfway through the meal, as Victor leaned across the table to pour water into Clara's cup, Ethan spoke. "Uncle Victor," he said softly, his voice clear and innocent. Victor smiled. "Yes, champ." Ethan tilted his head. "Why do you visit Auntie's room when she tells you not to wake the baby?" The room went still. It was as if someone had turned the world off. Mom froze, her hand halfway to her mouth. Clara dropped her spoon. Victor stopped breathing. The clock on the wall ticked once, and that sound felt deafening. What did you just say?" Victor stammered, his voice cracking. Ethan blinked, confused by the sudden tension. "You came last night," he said simply. "You were whispering, 'We have to stop before someone finds out.'" The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Clara's fork slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Victor's face drained of all color. "Grace," he managed, his voice shaking. "What is he talking about?" I didn't move. Didn't blink. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the cracked phone, and slid it across the table. "You tell me." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, the kind of silence that bends air, breaks hearts, and burns bridges all at once. Clara started to cry first. Not softly, but with panic. "No, Grace, it's not what you think, I swear, it just happened, Her words tangled, broken. She was trembling, her voice slipping between guilt and desperation. Victor didn't even try. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes empty. "It was a mistake," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. A mistake. That word. So small. So cruel. As if betrayal was something you could trip into and walk away from. Mom's hand trembled over her plate. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked between her daughters, one shattered, one silent, and then at Victor, the man she'd treated like a son. And for the first time in my life, I saw something break in her too. She pushed her plate away, stood slowly, and whispered, "Get out." Victor didn't argue. He just nodded, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door into the dark. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just footsteps fading down the road. That night, the house didn't feel like home anymore. Clara locked herself in the guest room. I could hear her crying, the kind of crying that sounds like punishment. Mom sat in the living room, motionless, her rosary clutched tight, lips trembling in prayer, but no words coming out. And Ethan, my sweet, innocent boy, curled beside me on the couch, eyes wide and unsure. He whispered, "I didn't mean to make Auntie sad, Mom." I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close enough to feel his heartbeat. My voice broke as I whispered back, "Sometimes, telling the truth hurts people. But lies, sweetheart, lies hurt everyone." He nodded, pressing his face against my shoulder. Within minutes, he fell asleep, but I didn't. I sat there in the dark, watching the door to Clara's room, listening to her muffled sobs, and wondering how something as sacred as family could crumble so fast. Sometimes, destruction doesn't come with fire. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, wearing your sister's face. Morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like aftermath, the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the air is heavy and the house still remembers the shouting. Mom didn't speak a word. Clara didn't come out of her room. And Ethan, sweet boy, tiptoed around the house as if even his footsteps could break something else. I moved through the motions, making tea, folding laundry, pretending normal still existed. But nothing about that day was normal. Every sound, the creak of the floorboard, the closing of a door, even the wind brushing the curtains, carried an echo of what had been said the night before. And what couldn't be unsaid. By afternoon, Mom finally spoke. Her voice was dry, quiet, but firm. "Grace," she said, staring out the window, "your sister made her bed. But she's still your sister." I wanted to scream. To ask her why forgiveness always came easier to mothers than to daughters. But instead, I said nothing. Clara had betrayed not just me, she'd stained the one bond that once defined us. We weren't sisters anymore. We were two women standing on opposite sides of a shattered truth. That night, I heard Clara's door creak open. Her steps were soft, hesitant, like a child sneaking out of punishment. When she appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face looked different, swollen eyes, pale lips, and a sadness too deep to fake. "Grace," she whispered, "can we talk?" I didn't look at her. I kept washing dishes that were already clean. The sound of running water was safer than the sound of her voice. She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry." Just 2 words. But they didn't fall gently. They fell like glass. "For what, Clara?" I asked quietly. "For the affair, or for mocking my son to feel better about your guilt?" She flinched. Her hands trembled. Tears filled her eyes again. I don't know what I was thinking. I felt. "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't explain it. Just say it for what it was, selfish." Her voice broke. I know. I know I hurt you. I hurt everyone. I don't even know who I am anymore." I turned off the tap, finally meeting her eyes. "You're my sister," I said softly. "But right now, I don't recognize you." She nodded slowly, then sank into the kitchen chair, covering her face. "I wish I could undo it," she whispered. "I wish I never came back here." The room was thick with unsaid words, guilt, love, betrayal, all swirling like smoke around us. I sat down opposite her, my voice low. Undoing it isn't the point, Clara. Living with it is. Days turned into weeks. Victor never came back. He sent money once, through a driver, and a note that simply said, "Take care of the baby." Nothing more. Clara's pregnancy grew heavier, but her spirit shrank. She barely ate. Barely spoke. Some nights I heard her whispering in her sleep, saying my name like an apology. Mom stayed strong for both of us, cooking, praying, pretending we could survive this with enough faith. But I could see the weight behind her eyes. She was breaking too. One evening, after putting Ethan to bed, I found Mom in the living room, staring at a family photo, the three of us as children, holding hands at the beach. Clara had a popsicle in her hand. I was laughing. Mom's hand rested on both our shoulders. "She's still my little girl," Mom said softly. "Even when she sins." I sat beside her, my chest tight. "I know, Mom. But how do you look at someone you love and not see the cracks?" She sighed. "Because love isn't blind, Grace. It just remembers who we were before the pain." That night, I cried quietly, not because of anger, but because of everything love couldn't fix. Then came the baby. Clara went into labor one stormy night. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rolled, and the lights flickered as if the heavens themselves were angry. We rushed her to the hospital. Mom prayed the entire ride. I just drove, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me sane. Hours later, she gave birth, a baby boy. Tiny, beautiful, crying like the sky itself had borrowed his voice. When the nurse placed him in Clara's arms, she sobbed so hard the doctor had to steady her. Mom smiled through her tears. I didn't. I just watched, quietly, carefully, because somewhere in my heart, I knew this child would carry both love and guilt from the moment he took his first breath. The next morning, Clara reached for my hand. "Grace," she whispered, "will you be his godmother?" For a moment, I didn't answer. Then I looked at the baby, so innocent, so undeserving of the sins that made his existence complicated, and I nodded. "Yes," I said softly. "He deserves better than what we gave him." Clara cried again, her tears falling on the baby's blanket. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the beginning of it. Because sometimes, healing doesn't start with forgetting. It starts with accepting that the pain was real, and you survived it anyway. The weeks after the baby's birth were quieter. Not peaceful, just quieter, the kind of silence that comes when a storm has passed but the air is still heavy with rain. Clara stayed mostly in her room. She moved like a ghost, slow, fragile, as if each step reminded her of what she'd lost. Sometimes I'd hear her singing to the baby, her voice cracked but soft. Other times, I'd find her staring out the window, watching the street without seeing it. Victor never returned. No calls. No letters. Just a shadow of a man who once promised forever. His silence was louder than any argument could have been. Ethan grew quieter too. He'd sit by the crib, watching the baby sleep, sometimes reaching out to touch his tiny hand. Once, I caught him whispering, "Don't worry. I won't let anyone hurt you." I asked him why he said that. He looked up at me and said, "Because Auntie hurt you. And I don't want him to grow up and think that's love." It broke me, not the words, but the truth inside them. My little boy had seen too much, understood too much. But he also had a heart that refused to harden. One evening, Clara asked to sit outside. We watched the sunset together, the sky painted in colors that looked like forgiveness, gold and pink bleeding into one another. She held the baby in her arms, and for the first time in months, her face wasn't clouded by guilt. "Grace," she said softly, "do you hate me?" I took a deep breath. I did. For a long time. She nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes. I hated me too, she whispered. Every time I looked at Ethan, I saw what I destroyed. And I kept asking myself why I did it. Why I wanted more when I already had everything. She looked at the baby, her lips trembling. I thought being loved by someone powerful would make me feel powerful too. But it didn't. It made me smaller. For a moment, I didn't speak. Then I reached over and took her hand. You made a mistake, Clara. A terrible one. But it doesn't have to be the only thing you are. She looked at me, surprised. You really think I can be better again? I think we both can, I said softly. But it starts with honesty, not just with others, but with ourselves. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain. And in that stillness, something in both of us cracked open, not pain this time, but release. Over the next few months, life slowly stitched itself together. Not perfectly. Never perfectly. But enough. Clara started helping me at the bakery, quietly, without complaint. She'd wake early, tie her hair up, and knead dough beside me in silence. Sometimes we'd talk about old times, school dances, summer storms, the little things that used to make us laugh. It wasn't forgiveness yet. But it was the road toward it. Ethan loved the baby, he named him Caleb. And Clara didn't argue. She said the name sounded strong, like someone who survives. Mom would watch us from the porch, her eyes soft with both pride and sadness. She'd always believed we'd find our way back to each other. And maybe, in some small way, she was right. Then, one afternoon, I found Clara writing a letter. She didn't hide it. She just said, "It's for Victor." Not to take him back, but to say goodbye. She mailed it the next day. No reply ever came. And she didn't expect one. That night, she sat beside the crib and whispered to Caleb. You don't need a man's name to know who you are. You just need love that doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient. I stood by the door, listening, quiet tears on my face. For the first time, I realized Clara wasn't the same woman who had mocked my son. She was broken, yes. But she was also rebuilding. Months later, on Ethan's 13th birthday, he blew out his candles and said, "Mom, can we keep Aunt Clara and Caleb here forever?" I laughed, wiping my eyes. "Why?" He grinned. "Because our house feels full again. Like Dad would have liked it." I froze, then smiled. "Yeah," I said softly. "Like he would have liked it." Clara smiled too, tears slipping down her cheeks, but this time, they were tears of something gentler. Something that looked like peace. And so, life continued. Not the life we planned, but the life we earned, messy, flawed, and real. Some nights, when the world quieted and I sat alone with my thoughts, I'd think about everything that happened, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the truth that tore us apart. And I realized something. The past doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes it rebuilds you. Stronger. Softer. Wiser. Because healing doesn't come when everything makes sense. It comes when you finally stop needing it to. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, if you've ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it, you'll understand that peace isn't loud. It's quiet, like the moment you finally breathe after holding it too long. So, if this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes, the stories we tell are the mirrors we need.